Well, what's happening, folks? Back here once again, Dr. Mo on this end, and we got Dr. Amber on the other. A reoccurring guest. It's a theme, huh? We must really enjoy our naturopathic talks, huh, Dr. Amber?
Yes, we do. And those peptides. We got to come back for a little another conversation because there's so much to talk about.
Well, they're hot, right? What percentage of what you think you talk about with patients is peptides?
Maybe 60, 70%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone
Yeah.
likes the cool stuff, right? They're flashy, they're fun, they're new.
hmm
So what's the other 20, 30%? You're doing hormones, diet, and lifestyle, or
Yeah, a lot of hormone testing, right? Because that can impact everything. Hormones run our life, similar to how peptides do as well. But yeah, it's gut testing. I work with a lot of chronic illness. I have a few Lyme patients. I have some women with mold, mycotoxin illness, and yeah, but a lot of hormones.
so what do you think, what are you obviously you're out on social media, you're doing interviews like this. For me, right, I have a lot of guys that already come to me kind of optimized.
hmm
So before everyone's looking into these peptides, are there things that you kind of talk about beforehand that people, because like we get I think most people at the level that are coming to us kind of get, okay, you got to sleep, you got to eat, is there anything in the basics you think you cover more often than others as far as like diet or sleep or lifestyle or anything?
Yeah, yeah. So all the fundamental pillars. The one thing that really the tenet is removing obstacles to cure, right? That's what we talk about in
Well, what does that
naturopathy.
mean?
So pulling things out of your lifestyle or your exposures that you're getting on a daily basis that could uh, cause harm to either hormones or brain function, gut health. And the tricky thing about that is that we don't even know where all of those are coming from, right? There's some things that we can avoid, but the current paradigm that we have is we can't avoid all radiation, EMF. We can only filter our water so much, but even water has memory. So there's, antibiotics and birth control pills. There's memory in water for a lot of these things. So we can do so many things to kind of clean up our environment, pull some of these things out in food, but at the same time we live in a toxic world, so everybody needs to have some sort of strategy to help their body to cope with that. I believe it's essential.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a conversation, right? Like, oh, why do I need peptides or hormones? Because, I get the argument on one end where you don't have an ibuprofen deficiency that you need to be taking ibuprofen, right? But I
hmm
agree with you that we live in such a world now. I get that, right? With guys, why can't I do it natural? And I'm like, well, you've been swimming in glyphosate for 20 years, which is Leydig cell toxic. So, what's kind of sounds like that's kind of your pitch when people are like, well, how do I stay natural? Or do you still, I get some resistance when people come to me, which is funny, right? As a naturopath, the doctor, I'm like, hey, I want to do hormones. They're like, but I want to stay natural, right?
hmm Yeah. Yeah, it's tricky because I see both. I see some people will come to me and they're already on medications and they're looking for other options because they're so ready to get off some of the strong medications that they're on, whether that be for autoimmunity or some other condition. But yeah, I think there's more acceptance in the bioidentical hormone world where we recognize and are able to educate uh, anybody who comes to see me or you, the men that you work with, the woman that I work with, on some of the benefits. I mean, these hormones impact every system in the body. So whether men are going through andropause or women are going through menopause or women are younger and they're really low in some of these hormones due to birth control or chronic stress that's showing up, we know that that's going to impact their quality of life, how they feel, and all of these other systems, brain function, gut function, hormones play a role everywhere. So, yeah, I see both. I see sometimes people will come to see me because they want to get off their medications, and other people will come to see me and they want to go really, they're more resistant to even things like peptides. Like, oh my gosh, I have to do an injection every day? What is this? You
Well,
see
how
that
do you
too?
handle questions like, I want to do the best thing. right? You know, and you I think there's ways to go through that question, but someone's like, just give me the best what's the best peptide? Like, how do you answer that question?
Yeah. That's a tough question. So the way that I would phrase it and relate to that question is by talking to them specifically about their goals. So we usually go through, why are you coming to see me? What are the biggest complaints that you have? What are your goals? Sometimes the patient's goals might be different than what I would think. Oftentimes they're the same, but if their goal is they want better sleep, then we're looking at strategies for that, lifestyle, peptide therapy, everything that's involved with that. And so, yeah, it kind of depends on the outcome, but what is the best peptide for what? For what
Right?
sort of outcome?
I mean,
Yeah,
you probably get,
it's a good question.
we live in this, right, this biohacking world where, and there are a lot of therapies that do a lot of different things, right? BPC 157 does a lot of things. Ozone
Mm-hmm.
therapy does a lot of things. IV therapy does a lot of things.
Yeah.
So it's funny though. I think an area that I've been working on, kind of education wise, is exactly that, because people want, like, is this food good for me, right? Like a Snickers bar versus an apple. It's like, really kind of depends on the situation, right? Because, to be honest,
Sure.
apple's a lot of sugar, right? Snickers bar, glycemic, and you can make arguments on kind of both ends. So, well,
Yeah.
let's go with this though. What do you think is the most popular peptide that you use?
I would say the BPC 157 is the one that most people have heard about first and will utilize first, even before they've seen me. And I'll use that oftentimes as well because leaky gut, who doesn't have it these days? With all the exposures, chronic stress, things that we know that impact the gut, leaky brain.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would say that one, along with I had used Thymosin-Alpha a lot with the BPC for autoimmune patients. So I have a lot of women with autoimmune conditions. I just met with patients with IBD, Crohn's today, and so I use a protocol. I've seen really good results with that in helping to recalibrate the immune response, the immune modulation. So really regulating what's happening with the immune system, not boosting it, but regulating it when we have an autoimmune condition. And then if we look at leaky gut as the driving cause, stage one of developing autoimmunity, we have to look at the gut. We have to add in something like BPC to help seal over and protect that mucosal lining in the gut. So those ones are really pillars. It just depends on what the complaint is when they come to see me and what they're looking to address and where they are in that kind of journey. But that's commonly where I start.
Yeah, but what if I just want to put on muscle and you think I have a leaky gut, right? How many times do you get people coming to you
Mm-hmm.
like, but I just want to do this, or this, right?
Right. Yeah, yeah. And then that, I think, goes back to explaining what some of the root causes might be and tapping into some of their symptoms. Like that same individual might actually have brain fog and might actually have food sensitivities and other things that they don't know that they have leaky gut yet. So, yeah, that's a tough one because sometimes the goal is to build muscle, and the actual thing that might be preventing healthy absorption of nutrients to build muscle is gut health, right?
Mhm.
You see
So
that.
have you seen any of these peptides, and you can use examples in particular, that you have maybe used before bioidentical hormone replacement? Have you seen any of them move hormone levels? And you can even kind of talk about what you've seen as far as the autoimmune. What kind of responses have you seen with peptides?
Yeah, great question. I actually turned, I had a client that I saw in the last week, and she really was interested in the peptide therapies, and I, based on where she was at, had to turn her away and say, "You need to get your we need to get your hormones tested. We need to do something else first." And that was not a good place to start. Sometimes I think that, so in going into menopause, if we have no hormones on board and we add in a peptide and we expect miraculous changes, that's a lot. I think there are some peptides that could move the needle or help, but phase one for me is always running hormones and looking at if it is a uh, menopausal woman, getting her started on some form of progesterone, testosterone, estrogen if she's low in proper amounts based on her. But yeah, so that for me is pillar one. And I have seen CJC ipamorelin. I actually have seen that support testosterone levels, not to the degree that exogenous testosterone injections would, but I've had lower doses of testosterone before in women who are on some form of bioidentical testosterone. And it's not, dramatic, but it's enough that they'll notice it in terms of feeling kind of overstimulated or agitated if they're already on a good dose of testosterone and then they take CJC regularly. So that's the one that I've seen there. As far as autoimmune changes, I've seen I have a couple clients who've had phenomenal success, life-changing in terms of how they feel, with redirecting that immune signaling that's been lost or that's been dysfunctional. So in autoimmunity, it's the self attacking the self, which is not what we want. So we really need to step in, and it's kind of like kids on a playground that are going crazy and they're all attacking each other. We really need to step in and direct the flow of traffic there. So that's what we do with things like Thymosin-Alpha. We help to modulate or regulate what's happening in the immune system. And so when we do that, I've seen energy levels improve. I think that's the biggest thing that I noticed when I use Thymosin-Alpha. And I get lots of messages saying, hey, my energy improved on Thymosin-Alpha. And that's because your immune system takes so much energy to run, especially if you have autoimmune signaling happening. And so that's the biggest thing that I've noticed. I have a client who had multiple autoimmune conditions, and we started on some of these peptide therapies, and energy levels changed, sleep changed. They were about to go on Humira, strong biologic drugs. And that's really the only option. That's the sad reality, is these strong suppressive drugs are what we use to manage autoimmune conditions like Crohn's, ankylosing spondylitis, a lot of severe autoimmunes. And I go back and think about what's happening in the cell that causes that to happen, that autoimmune process, and how does that get triggered. And we could talk about the whole story of the thymus and what happens there, how high stress, high cortisol can kill those thymocytes, the cells in the thymus, leading to more of this immune dysregulation that shows up in autoimmunity. Cancer is a form of immune dysfunction. So it's really about understanding what's going on in the cell and correcting that, and then we can tend to see improvements with some of these peptide therapies for that reason.
And then, so you're stacking. How's your toolbox as far as NAD is something we've talked a lot about, or any other mitochondrial support? Anything, any changes or updates or things you've seen in that area?
Yeah, I love using NAD in a couple of places. If someone has like chronic fatigue and due to a viral load, EBV, history of mono, reactivation of EBV, even to COVID, post-COVID, long hauler syndrome, where they have that viral load, it can definitely turn down the dial and energy production in the cell, right? Viruses, it's why we get so fatigued when we get a virus, why COVID knocks you out, or any sort of viral load. And so what NAD does is that cofactor for making ATP or energy in the cell, and it'll turn up the dial. So I like to use it in those viral load, any sort of history of viral illness, Lyme, mycotoxin illness can be helpful for the fatigue, the brain fog that happens. And then also on the other end for more optimization for energy. It's really good in athletic performance. I've had cyclists who say I can just power through, my endurance is better, I can just work out harder. If I'm boxing, I can last longer. So that's really where I like to use NAD. But because it's really correcting what's happening on the cell, we use it at both ends of the spectrum, right? And somebody who's chronically ill and somebody who's looking to optimize their athletic performance.
How have you been using it? Oral, patches, sub-Q, IV?
I've used it in all of those ways historically, but right now what I do is the sub-Q injection. Have you experimented with that at all?
my pulse is that's pretty much where everyone's going.
Yep.
Right. I've been doing I do 50 milligrams once a week, and I put a little bit of B12 in there. That's my one IM shot a week that I do. I'll do vitamin D every now and then, but.
Great. Yeah. And it helps. Have you noticed change in energy?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. When I do it, I overall nootropically, this is what's so weird is because I get how there are people who are skeptical. Like, I don't know, I'll scroll through Instagram and I found people who, are super, super skeptical of supplements. And right. And like some people are like, well, you can't, just because you get a research study that shows a sick person benefits from this doesn't mean that a healthy person benefits from this. Right. Like I saw this one guy in particular, he was, I don't remember. It's, you're going through Instagram, you see some trolls out there. But this person's whole profile was just like going after each and every supplement. It's like NAC or whatever, ALA, all these supplements. And, I think that obviously being a scientist, I like that. I like the kind of the balanced view. And I think NAD was kind of one that they went after. And you get it, but they're just coming from such a different world where they only see disease as like things falling off, right? They don't get the longevity thing like we do. Yeah. And I think, I love NAD. In that case, I did IV. It's just like can be a lot. Like I don't know about you, 250 milligrams. I'm like,
that's intense.
Yeah.
Yeah. The IV is definitely intense, and I prefer the sub-Q. I actually made the mistake the other day. You know how you're supposed to pull out the syringe to check if you're in a blood vessel?
Oh, whoa.
I actually injected into a blood vessel, and I got this massive NAD rush.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
That's scary.
Yeah, and
I
know better. I lived. It was crazy. I did have great energy that day, though.
I wonder how many people pull back and check for a flash.
I know. It reminded me that I need to do that.
Where did you, if you don't mind, where'd you inject?
Abdomen. I did a sub.
Yeah. I technically, I'll put almost everything in my glute nowadays. Superficial glute, just like at a sub-Q angle. And I mean, I do that in the lateral quad for just about everything.
Great.
So we'll see.
Yeah.
I like NAD.
I like NAD too. And
how much you doing?
Sub-Q? Gosh, I'm such a baby. I can only do about 20 to 30 milligrams.
No, that's sub-Q. Yeah, I think I'm doing, it's 200 milligrams. Yeah, I do 50.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know people. There's some colleagues of ours, 100 to 200. I'm just like, y'all crazy, man. I'm all right.
Yeah, I couldn't do that. And I typically will increase the dose on somebody who's never had a sub-Q NAD because I don't want them to get that sickness that you get from an IV and then really hate NAD from there.
Well, you can't. The problem with the sub-Q is you get that shot, and if you do too much, it's like, okay, you got to ride it out for 10 minutes. Where IV, you can stop it. So
slow it. Yeah.
Have you looked at Methylene Blue?
That's one on my list to try. I really want to try it. Have you tried it? It's IV.
I've done the oral ones, but a couple of my colleagues, like McNulty and King, they've been doing them and they love them. Like Corey specifically was telling me really good stuff about it. He did a massive dose, and him and Doug were like off the walls, feeling great, ton of energy. So they've been doing it with a couple of patients, and McNulty and Encini has been doing it for Alzheimer's and a couple of people too. And it seems like it's having some benefits. So I've done oral. I have yet to do IV.
Okay. Yeah. I think the only thing with that one is it can't be used in with psychiatric meds. That it will interfere with those. But for someone with cognitive decline, it's phenomenal.
Yeah. That one scared me a little bit because it does have some like SSRI and that's one where it's like, I think they're still figuring out the mechanism of action. Like there's some of them that are over, and this is like with every drug, right? Cocaine, people are like, oh, dopamine uptake inhibitors. Like actually it works on all of that. And just like, that's just a good example, but you can go into any of these like Lexapro or just name one of those drugs. They don't work on one thing. So we don't really know what can and cannot be mixed with it. But the dosage on the Methylene Blue, I think, is like 250 milligrams IV and even way higher. I'll have to go back and dig through some of the studies, but they're super, super high. I think it's actually used for low hemoglobin, right? So it helps carry oxygen. So but
Yeah.
then that's going to work on mitochondria. It's going to do all kinds of stuff. But that's where I was like, orally, I did like a 4 milligram of it. So, and
Okay.
there you can go up to 25, but if you're IVing like 10x, you're going to
Wow.
be fine on that smaller amount.
So one of them is 4 milligrams. Is that what it is?
You can get 4, 8, 25, just depends on the compounding pharmacy. And there's a lot of supplements out there that are carrying it now too.
Okay.
So it'll be interesting to see how that
Yeah.
comes out and evolves. So
Absolutely. Yeah. The blue tongue is all over the place.
yes,
That's pretty.
yes. And then, yeah, you can stack it obviously with other nootropics. So,
Hmm.
do you have any favorite supplement nootropics besides peptide nootropics?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. So I really like Qualia. It's one of the
Hmm.
ones that's probably most well known. But I've used that. Uh, I'll stack Cmax, the
Hmm.
intranasal, sometimes with synapsin, which is the NR nicotinamide riboside, B12, RG3 intranasal. And then I'll take Qualia. I'll usually do one of those intranasals with Qualia. And then I have this other nootropic spray that's like a sublingual neuroperformance that
I
I'll
don't know that one.
use. So it's one of the only sublingual new peps. It has new pept in it.
Oh, yes. I knew it. It's like
NOOPEPT.
a piracetam derivative, or not, isotope would be the word. It works similar to that, but more powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, and that stuff is great. That really works. I haven't found another sublingual form of it, and I specifically looked for the sublingual. So that one has choline as well, which is, great for brain function.
Hmm. Are you worried about dependency or overusage? For me, I like caffeine is one for
Mm,
sure that I
yeah,
start to use, and it definitely gives me the effects that I want. Do you have that any kind of withdrawals with any of the nootropics or peptides?
good question. I mean, you and I've been through med school, so yeah, caffeine and all sorts of nootropics have been used in the process to get through, and learn and pass boards and everything. So yeah, I don't get the withdrawal effect with Qualia. The recommended dosage is 5 out of 7 days a week, similar to CJC Ipamorelin, so that the body doesn't adapt. We really want to, keep your body responsive to that peptide or that nootropic. So I haven't seen a change with that. I definitely noticed the improvement in mood. There's some of those amino acids, tyrosine, that can improve mood as well in the qualia, but I don't think the qualia is as addictive as something like coffee
Yeah.
for me. Coffee is definitely, I think, a big one that's hard to remove or get rid of completely. Easier to just keep increasing the dose. So yeah,
How do you
that's
have
a
that conversation with your
great
patient?
question.
Is coffee good or is coffee bad?
That is a tricky question because it improves glutathione and it is the number one source of antioxidants for most Americans,
Yeah.
unfortunately, but true, right?
Yeah.
So on those levels, it's really good. Um, there is some studies about how it can actually be protective. I used to work with a lot of Parkinson's patients and how coffee, because it increases glutathione, it can be protective in the antioxidant amount. But yeah, I mean, the caffeine is also a stimulant and it can wreak havoc on adrenal function over time. And we know that, the long-term effects of high chronic cortisol is poor immune function, breakdown of tissues, damaging downstream hormones, sex hormones, thyroid hormones. So it's a catch-22, right? What's your thought on coffee, caffeine
Oh yeah, no,
consumption?
I'm in alignment. I mean, I'm unfortunately addicted to caffeine. It's part of my
Likewise.
everyday routines, and I try and go without it. And if I can make it, I don't know, till noon without some for a day, I consider that a win.
Hmm.
And, kind of going back to the toxic soup that we live in, unfortunately, we live in a world that when I'm sitting in front of a screen all day, I think that maybe I don't remember needing caffeine when I wasn't doing what I'm doing now. And that's not to say I don't love what I'm doing. It's just a different type of focus and, to sit down and be able to do anything for 8 hours. Right. I remember I heard a joke about, they labeled this like 30-year-old. It was like I think it was like one of those old newspaper jokes. and it's a parent teacher conference. And they're like, Mr. Smith, your son has ADHD. And he's like, I saw my son play with Legos for 3 hours straight last night. I think your teaching just sucks. I mean, it was
Yeah.
being mean, but kind of the point
Mhm.
where we just live in this world where, whether it's doing my taxes or whatever, there's just some things that I don't know if we were necessarily evolved to doing. And so you have to figure out a tool that can help you do it. Like that's not the way we evolved, wasn't doing taxes. So my brain wasn't used to needing acetylcholine for 8 hours.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the sleep thing. I say that with animals all the time. We're the only one that goes to sleep and wakes up to an alarm. When animals are
True.
tired, they just sleep. You got a dog, what does he do? She sleeps whenever she wants. And it's not like a human's like, I'm tired, I'm gonna go take a nap. It's like, nope, I'm at work till 5:30, then I eat, then I do this and this, and then I sleep for 8 hours.
Yeah.
So
So true.
we live in this world where you have to adapt. And I get this with testosterone a lot. Like, at what age should you start T? Should you not? And our peptide are all these things. You're in LA. We're in a very competitive place. You have patients that come to you. They're all on Vyvanse or Adderall. And, that comes down to a very individualized question about like, hey, this is what you're doing to yourself. Know that. And if that's what you need or want to succeed. It's funny. I had a conversation with a soccer player, and he's young in college and he's trying to make it to the pros and he's practicing a lot. And he brought something up and we were talking about fitness and all that stuff. And I was like, oh yeah, I used to do bodybuilding, blah, blah. He goes, man, that's just so bad on the body. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, well, you're just, all those weights and you're doing this for all this time and then you're eating and doing all this thing. And I kind of reflected, I'm like, didn't you just run for 3 straight hours yesterday? And then the day before that, and the day before that, and the years before that. And then you went to weight training, and it's a little bit different. And I was just kind of reflecting, I'm like, hey man, everyone has different goals. Everyone has different things to do with their life. And we need something that gives us meaning. And if that's what gives your life meaning, then that's fine. They said that someone interviewed Arnold Schwarzenegger, like, when he was 5th Mr. Olympia or something. Like, it's so strange. You have these huge, big muscles. Like, why do you do that? And he goes, I don't think it's strange. He goes, I think it's strange that men go and sit in their garage for 4 hours and try and make a car go 100 miles an hour in 3 seconds. That's strange. And same thing with dangerous. Like, it's so dangerous to be so strong, or so, you're lifting. He's like, is that not dangerous? Is not like driving in traffic dangerous? So
Yeah.
so individualized.
So true. Yeah, and how do you approach that conversation? I mean, with testosterone, I'm sure you have men who come to you and they're a little bit hesitant about jumping on. There's some guys who really feel like that they need that because their symptoms are so severe, fatigue, jumping on that. So how do you bridge that conversation with them when you're talking about pros and cons and other things that they can incorporate?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because, I mean, at the end of the day, if you have Michael Moeller and he has a testosterone of 600, let's say we have a Michael Moeller with the testosterone of 1200. From what I've seen, the guy with the 1200 is going to be able to do pretty much everything better. Work out longer, sleep better. I could go down a list of personal stuff, but it's just overall. And I've had that because I've only done 3 months of TRT. I wanted to try it out. I've done enclomiphene, Clomid, ACG. I've done different stuff. And, just running over the math of the numbers where testosterone used to be to where they are now. I had my testosterone measured first year medical school at 450. And which is, I've come to find out after measuring, most men, even at 23, is like, it's not terrible. It's not great, but it's, I would say, average. Somewhere most men are coming in, right? 350 to 500. Sometimes you get a 600 one. You're like, wow, you're good.
Yeah.
But if we go back and look at the data, like 1988, the average 65-year-old was 550. So 30 years ago, a 65-year-old had almost twice the levels that I had at 23. So I bring those things up. I'm like, look, this is the world we're living in. This is where we're at. And the hard part is about society in general and like kind of over competitiveness, that over masculine side of like achieving. And you see this with bodybuilding. You see this in professional sports. It's like the guys who are willing to put their body and put random stuff in their body and experiment are the ones that get that competitive edge, right? And the margin for winning is just so small, you know,
So
like a
true.
little bit, you know, and then same thing. Okay, you got Michael Moeller at 600, Michael Moeller at 1200. And then you have like the one that has the NAD, right? Like performance
Mm-hmm.
enhancing. And then we go down that rabbit hole of like what should be legal, what should be illegal. And then, I mean, I've leaned more and more into like, it's your life. I think people need to be educated. I don't know how much of it needs to be readily available, but
Yeah.
I had a guy reach out to me, and I'm pretty sure Anavar, oxylandrone. Sometimes I get all those switched up between Winstrol and their Deca. Like, you know what I'm saying? There's
Yeah.
street names and there's regular names, but Anavar, I believe, is oxylandrone, which is an anabolic steroid. You know, this guy,
Yep.
he had a
I'm
patellar tendon
familiar.
tear. He's like late
Mm-hmm.
30s. And he's like, dude, I've taken Anavar before and I know it helps heal quicker. You know, and I have a potential. He's like, it's partially torn. It might tear all the way. They can't do surgery. And that's, you know, that's a very like off. I don't know if I can use that off label. It's something I need to look into as a practitioner, because that was I've had guys ask me to prescribe them anabolic steroids
Sure.
because, right, there are uses for those in case of cancer and all that.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's hard as a practitioner to be like, to be honest, the Anavar would probably be good. Like, just do it for 3 months. It's not that great on your liver. But if it heals your patellar, like, you're going to he could walk down the street and rip his patellar in half. Like, that's
Right.
probably worse than 3 months of Anavar. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. It's kind of a cost benefit
Yeah.
analysis in terms of what's going to be better. Yeah.
Right.
It's interesting because it's almost like the level at which we're expected to perform now cognitively behind a computer, or I'm thinking about working on Wall Street and just like these high power professions, living in LA, being an executive. The demands are higher than ever that, and even in med school, I mean, if you're not taking some sort of performance or brain mental enhancing drug, uh, you're falling behind
Mm-hmm.
at this point in time because we're expected to perform, you know, at this high level. So, yeah, and that's where I think things like peptides and things like hormones come into play, because people need something to improve how they feel and their quality of life, because they're suffering with fatigue and insomnia and some of these issues. For a lot of your guys, you know, it's a quality of life thing. And
Yeah.
we can offer or talk to them about these strategies that, you know, could be used in addition to or instead of, depending on where they're at, to some of the drugs that are out there. So yeah, it's so individual. But what I find is the demand, the our biology cannot withstand the demand that is required of us in the modern day world, cognitively and sometimes physically if it's bodybuilding or something as well. So, I mean, how many natural bodybuilders are out there anymore? There's so many performance enhancing drugs that are used
Well, as
because that's the
pre-workout,
standard
I
almost.
used to, I never took any anabolic steroids. I did compete naturally, but I did think of things along the lines of like, where does that begin and end? Because ibuprofen is a very powerful drug, very
Mm-hmm.
powerful. Tylenol. So
Yep.
early bodybuilders used to use the ECA stack.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard that? It's ephedra, caffeine, and Advil. So
Yeah.
basically, beta 2 agonists, caffeine, which is cyclic AMP, whatever, does a bunch of different
Mm.
things, and
Yeah.
then Advil to numb you.
Advil.
So
Yep.
you just tear yourself up in the gym, and it's like, is that stronger than? Because to be honest, if caffeine it regulates all your hormones, it messes with dopamine, serotonin, it does a lot of cortisol,
Mm-hmm.
it does a lot of different things. And there's a quote about you can judge a society by like which drugs it allows or something.
There you go. DSM, caffeine's in the DSM as a drug, right? Or it's in the PDR. What is
Oh,
it?
is it? It
Whichever.
should be. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
it's a drug. So, yeah, yeah. And you think about peptides. Where did peptides originate? They originated in the athletic community. Russia. A lot of the research was done in Russia and Germany on the peptide therapies, and these athletes were performing at a higher level and winning.
yeah. I mean, that's the hard. Yeah, I agree with you, and I like the way that you put it about our bodies aren't accustomed to this, and so it's like we either adapt or die. Really, at the end of the day, because and when other people have the means, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, who am I to judge or say that you can't do this because of, and I don't know if you've had that. I've had guys that are, professional. I won't say too much, but they're in that level of, I'm like, I don't know
Yeah.
if you were a regular guy, I might give you testosterone, but I don't want you getting popped and then my name being the doctor to do it. But then I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Then I can't, he's going to go and get it on the street or somewhere else.
Yeah. That
So,
that's yeah, that can be part of the trouble too with regulation around peptides or whatever it is, because now then the black market grows in some of these communities. It's challenging there. Yeah, I see that.
well, what's been your
I see that
experience
too.
on the female end, hormone wise? What do you see being kind of the first place to go? Because so I've not done a whole lot of female hormones. I kind of
Mm-hmm.
understand estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. Um, what's kind of your line of thinking? Can you do one at a time? Can I put a woman just on progesterone? Can you do just testosterone? Can you do estrogen? And can you kind of
Yeah,
speak to that?
absolutely. Yeah, so it really depends on the person, similar to men's health and testosterone. Uh, you check their levels and see where they're at. So if they are just low in
Well,
progesterone, yeah,
what's hard about women is you have your cycles, right? So
yeah,
my first job out of school, yeah, I measured a ton of women, and I'm like, this estrogen was 20, this estrogen's at 70. Where are you at in your cycle? Luteal phase, whatever. It's like, oh,
yeah,
you're in the range, okay.
yeah, yeah.
So I don't know how, and then you have premenopause, postmenopause. You have them like,
Yeah. Yeah, it's a whole new world, that's for sure. It's way more complicated. So there's a specific window in which I like to measure. It's usually either day 3 or 19 through 22, 21, 22. And so those are the best times to measure for most women. Now, a woman in menopause doesn't have a cycle, so we're not really as stringent on when we test. We're just looking at we're doing it in conjunction or in a specific time frame around when she's taking her bioidenticals, so we know that she's on the appropriate dose. For a lot of younger women, you can see, if they're on birth control, you can see flatline levels of hormones. Many times you can see testosterone really, really low libido as a result
is that
over
due to
time.
the exogenous hormones suppress all of their endogenous production, and they just run at? Because I have seen that
Yeah.
with guys. Like, if you really want to mess a dude up, give him just a very, very low amount of testosterone,
Hmm.
right? Like, you give him like 20 a week, it's enough to shut off his own production, and
Yeah.
then you're only giving him enough to just basically flatline him, and it just sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because I even think about the quality of meats that women are buying as well. If
Mm.
they have a high, not only antibiotics, but the hormones that are used and how that can signal. Is that a contributing factor to PCOS and a lot of these hormone disorders that we're seeing now? It's probable. Those are, inputs. And so I think about that as a possible factor. It's always multifactorial. It's usually a combination of high stress, some exposure to birth control, even antibiotics can throw off the gut flora, can mess with kind of hormone levels. Um, sleep changes. Women will go through so many hormone fluctuations in their life. A lot of women will lose their cycle when they're stressed, when they're really lean in their training, they're an athlete in high school and college. It'll change after they have a baby in menopause and, in between and other points in their life. And so there's so many fluctuations that happen and it makes it more challenging. But when you understand some of the environmental factors, things to look out for, things to avoid, what's happening in PCOS. It's really something's going wrong in the cell. We're losing insulin sensitivity. Blood sugar regulation is poor. There's a lot of similar driving factors if we trace it back. The other thing related to NAD, which helps the mitochondria, is all of the hormones are made in the mitochondria: cortisol, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone for women. And so when I see women who are, burning the candle at both ends and, caffeinating, just um, taking the reserve from their mitochondria with all the cortisol that's being made. Either that or they're under a lot of stress. They have a history of trauma. They're constantly producing cortisol, that stress hormone. And that can, deplete that mitochondrial reserve over time. And that's linked to poor fertility. That's linked to all these hormone imbalances when your body just kind of downregulates its energy production, its hormone production. So the mitochondria, and then we know that impacts the brain health over time. So that's, I would say, a fundamental pillar that I address. It, I think a lot of female hormone doctors maybe aren't really talking about or addressing at this point in time. Same with the thymus gland. That's another one that I really make it a point to educate my women about what happens to the thymus gland and how those high stress levels, high cortisol can damage that, leading to that risk potentially of autoimmune signaling or other immune dysfunction that's happening in their body. And so a bit of a different approach. I do look at the hormones and then what level to give them, whether they're in menopause or they're a younger woman. I don't like to give bioidentical hormones to a woman who is younger than ideally 40. Some women go through menopause early, right? They'll have premature ovarian failure, or they'll have other reasons why they lose their cycle earlier on, trauma, an event. I even heard of some women who have had COVID and they're, right around that perimenopausal phase and they've completely lost their cycle. They go straight into menopause due to the stress of that viral load, viral infection. So yeah, it really, it depends on where she's at, what she's low in. We know progesterone really helps with sleep and calming the central nervous system in women. And so that's tends to be the hormone that will add in if a woman is low going into menopause. She can have a lot of hot flashes and more severe symptoms, insomnia, definitely the mood fluctuations. I know women can have these wild mood swings
Oh
when
yeah.
they're going through that phase. Yeah.
Yeah, they can.
Yeah.
That's why to me it always
You've
made
seen it.
sense when I heard about progesterone being like a GABA agonist. I was like, why don't they give progesterone to all women?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
What's that? Is it too much progesterone? What does that look like?
Yeah, you don't want to have too much progesterone. I mean, so it's sedating. It can cause too much GABA,
Mhm.
fatigue and sleepiness, and you don't want to have too much on board. Some women don't, I mean, not everyone, that's the other interesting thing. I've had women who will have bloating or other symptoms when they start on something like progesterone. So then it's evaluating, well, is there appropriate response or what are other factors that are playing into that? So it's a tender balance, and we typically will run hormones every 2 to 3 months just to see where that woman is at once we start her on something. And it's also pivotal to look at the gut microbiome as a woman is put onto hormones, especially estrogen and testosterone, because if she doesn't have the right gut bugs, she won't get rid of that excess estrogen,
Mhm.
right? That's part of the equation. And there's other factors too. There's, we know cruciferous vegetables will help with estrogen detox. That active compound DIM, we give that to a lot of women. We use it for men too sometimes, right?
Do
So,
you ever use like obviously dim and in guys a lot of times if a guy's estrogen's high, yeah, I could work on his gut
mm-hmm,
and I can give him an anastrozole. And
yeah,
there's a lot of controversy how whatever maybe it's dangerous. I personally calling through the research, I don't think it's like all that bad. And in the men's health field, there's just like this, right? And people are like, oh, the
mm-hmm,
estrogen in a guy can be 90. It's not a big deal. There's like, dude, an estrogen needs to be 25 to 35.
mm-hmm,
So I'm actually, I would say kind of in the middle. I go a lot by symptoms. Like if a
yeah,
guy's at 40 and he just feels fine, I'm not going to worry about it. Over 50, 60s, when I start looking at kind of using an anastrozole on a guy,
yeah,
really small dose, 5.5 milligrams once or twice a week.
mm-hmm.
Can you do that in women or they don't, do they?
Yeah,
Usually it's not
theoretically,
like,
but yeah, it's not common practice to use something like an anastrozole. There's other things that you could use to block that. Yeah, but not common practice in women's health.
hmm. Yeah, and two, when you put them on testosterone, then you get the conversion. And one area in women I'm a little more confused about too is with a guy, if I put him on T, I know his T is going to plummet, like his natural endogenous production. Does that happen with like just progesterone? Or does it happen with just estrogen? Or how does that? That's why I'm
Yeah.
concerned about like if you'd put a woman on just one hormone, like a guy, you put him on T, the testosterone will flow over in estrogen. You don't have to worry about it, right? Like you don't do estrogen replacement therapy in dudes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a different strategy based on what you see. The Dutch test provides this beautiful kind of map. So you can see the DHEA turning into testosterone conversion to estrogen and progesterone levels. And so um, you don't see that. There is that same kind of conversion in women of testosterone to estrogen, but I'll use different strategies. So if they're low across the board in just their androgens, DHEA and testosterone, we can just add in DHEA, maybe testosterone as well. But if they're low across the board in everything, I'll use like pregnenolone and sometimes add in uh, progesterone or something, depending on what she's low in. But yeah, it depends on what's low. I usually will go higher up and address and give something like pregnenolone, which is that mama hormone that turns into everything else, really.
So can you just give if women are having problems sleeping, it's like progesterone a good just like bam? Does that usually fix it or?
It
And like, how do you
depends.
support that, right? Like when you think about TRT, like are there natural ways to produce, and this is for men too, is there natural ways to help support progesterone levels?
Yeah, yeah. So you could do seed cycling. You can take something called evening primrose oil, which is actually
To
really
help with
helpful.
guys, right
Um,
there.
I haven't used it in
Yeah.
men's health. I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, men have progesterone too, just not. Yeah,
Yeah. Every time I
not
measure,
as
it's
much.
just under point 0.1, whatever.
Yeah,
So, I mean, I could do some
very low.
Dutch touching and stuff. And I measured it a
Yeah.
little bit in the beginning of my clinical experience. And and I've known some practitioners that give progesterone to guys and some like it. And I gave it to a couple guys and didn't feel like it did anything. So I was just like,
Hmm.
we've had that DHEA pregnenolone conversation before. Sometimes I think
Yeah.
I know me personally, it's super hit or miss. I took some today, feel pretty good. So I don't
DHEA?
know. Yeah, DHEA and I took some pregnenolone, 25 milligrams of each.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So
Okay.
I had a long weekend of camping and I like camping and my sleep is usually pretty shallow.
Mm-hmm.
There's wilderness, like there's
Yeah.
a connectedness about being in nature, but there's nature noises that wake you up all the time and rolling around. And it's not like
Yeah.
sleeping in my dark room where my door's locked.
True. Yeah.
So my
I
sleep
could
was
see that.
I slept really good the last 2 nights. And so I was like, hey, I took a little adrenal cortex and DHEA, pregnenolone, and some alpha GPC, the
Yeah.
choline this morning.
Good.
So feeling okay, feeling pretty good. Got a good
Okay.
little groove in here today.
Little
Um, what,
recalibration.
yeah, anything new for sleep?
So I typically will look at, you asked about progesterone. I'll look at cortisol. So sometimes if the progesterone doesn't seem to abate the problem, or we use something like CJC Ipamorelin and there's sleep issues, usually we'll find out by running a Dutch test or finding their 4-point cortisol and see what's happening. But yeah, the cortisol can cause those either awakenings in the middle of the night that a lot of women experience. I'd say 70% of the women that I see will have that at some point. I had that my first year in med school. I was like waking up on the dot, 2:30 a.m., 3 a.m. every night, high cortisol spike, blood sugar drop, stressful period in life. And so we got to correct for that. And a lot of women will try and correct for that with melatonin.
Mm-hmm.
Melatonin doesn't seem to really abate that oftentimes because it's not a melatonin issue. It's oftentimes a high cortisol issue. So we have to give some herbs that will really work on that, things that will block or blunt that cortisol response. So phosphatidylserine is an amazing one. I like to use something called DHHB. Are you
Mm-hmm.
familiar with that? Have you used that? Yeah.
Hinokia, it's magnolia bark constituent or something, right?
Yeah, yeah, and
I
it boosts GABA. It's
Yeah,
a
I
little less
think I
specific.
felt like I took it and I kind of like MK677. I felt like it did what it did and it made me a little bit groggy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Oh.
it can. I've actually taken it too, and I've I've had that morning like sleep drunk. That's what they'll use that word with melatonin, where you just feel kind of
Yeah, I
exhausted in the
don't.
morning, tired.
Melatonin's kind of the same way for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So I look at adding in certain things to work on cortisol because I find that for many women, when stress is the problematic factor with sleep, we have to look at that and not. It's not always a progesterone issue. It's not always a melatonin issue. Oftentimes, it's a cortisol issue. Sometimes progesterone will help, but it usually won't take away a cortisol spike in the middle of the night. Yeah. Trying to think if there's anything else that I use for sleep. Oh, I've been using patches. Uh, a lot more patches. So TaylorMade has some different iontophoresis patches now that
Are
you
you still
can
doing the
get.
NADs at all, or are you getting weird responses?
Yeah, I'm not using those
Yeah.
anymore. I've been using Sub-Q NAD.
Yeah, we were getting I was getting some topical reactions.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm not sure what happened if they brought it to market and they hadn't worked through that, but I think there's another company that's created a better product that doesn't have that
Hmm.
irritation issue. So
Sub-Q is the way to go. So,
I agree. Much easier for most people.
what's in these other patches then?
Yeah, so these are, gosh, they have a combination of herbs and I think there's a little bit of melatonin in there. Uh, but it's, lemon balm, valerian, some of the ones in small doses. I just started it, so it's from a company. They make a bunch of patches for all different things. They have, ones that help with cognitive performance. And actually, they developed it for bariatric patients who don't absorb through the gut. And so the
Hmm.
whole company is just patches that transdermal absorption of a lot of these nutrients. And they, create a blend that's very specific for a purpose. But they have an omega-3 patch, which is interesting. I didn't know it was transdermally available, but
I mean, it's a
yeah,
fat.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I've been doing more of the patches.
Random side note. My intuition has always been kind of, how can I say this, fishy about fish oil.
Mm.
Um,
Tell me
this
more.
is, it's a common conversation. Like when we think about a lot of, I don't know, there's a lot of contradictions that I have in this area because obviously getting 300 milligrams of caffeine in nature is hard to do. Getting
Yeah.
6 grams of arginine in nature is really hard to do,
Mm-hmm.
right? But we know if we do like 6 grams of arginine, like I'm going to get vasodilation.
Yep.
I'm still skeptical, and I wonder if we'll figure out or see in the future. I agree with the omega 3, 6, and 9 thoughts. For those, most people listening know omega 3s are good. 6 and 9 is very debatable what way in ratios they are detrimental, right? Or even
Mm-hmm.
like, even like avocado oil, like listen to Paul Saladino, he's like, stuff's poison, right?
Yep. Yep.
So I am wondering though, with fish oil, intuitively, I've always felt like it was kind of weird. It's like you put all this, you squeeze out a sardine, right? And you put it in these little capsules. And I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like to me, it's always been real hit or miss with patients, whether fish oil does much. I can't say. I've tried a lot of different brands, a lot of different things. But what's interesting about the world that we're in is I'm very results oriented, so I'm like, someone's
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm tired, I'm like, here's 300 milligrams of caffeine, it works, right? Like, you've got problems, BPC, libido problems, testosterone, melanotan, whatever, like it works, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's been your experience with fish oil? Is that something you give someone and someone's like, wow, my joints feel better, my skin? I've sometimes heard that, but I don't know if,
Yeah, I would say it's not. I used it. I used it a lot when I was in Bastyr University Clinic because what else do you use when they come in
magnesium,
with
fish
chronic?
oil, diet diary. Yeah, yeah,
That's it.
about all you can give
Yeah.
people.
Um, I don't use it as frequently now. Once in a while I will. But yeah, I hear what you're saying about effectiveness. So when I start to hear feedback that, hey, I'm feeling better, this is working on a protocol, and whether that be NAD or certain anti-inflammatory remedies or The peptides is where I get feedback. A lot of times hormones, right? Life changing for men to get on testosterone. Same for women when they start sleeping and they have enough progesterone. They don't feel as anxious. So yeah, I haven't seen massive, nobody's come to me and said, my life has changed because of fish oil.
Hmm. Okay, cool. That's just my, and
Yeah.
I don't know. It's one of those things. I always try and it doesn't matter what it is. I think you know me. I try and like, I wonder if this is good for me, really, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
most whatever way. And that's one thing I kind of joked about Paul Saladino earlier. Like I really appreciate that kind of carnivore. Like I get it. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of a cool way
Yeah.
of like, hey, actually these plants are poisoning you. That's how you get an increase in glutathione. I was like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
this guy's got a point, you know? And it's like, like anything, the poison makes the dose too. So, but
Right.
I've been skeptical of fish oil. It's always just one of those things like fishy burps. And that's one too, I'm a little skeptical of. It might do more harm than good when
Mm-hmm.
people especially are buying bad ones. Like they're rancid, and you're just like, you go into Costco or Walmart and they're getting them and you're like, I don't know about that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I know. A lot of those are pretty rancid. And, if you're going to extract, it's just like coffee. If you take a pesticide laden bean and you concentrate it into a hot beverage, you're going to get a pesticide concentrated beverage,
Yep.
a toxin drink. And so, same with fish oil, you're concentrating something down. And there are some people who should not be eating a lot of fish because they don't detox mercury well. And
Hmm.
Dr. Shade talks a lot about, he has like a tri-mercury test where you can look at, are you detoxing it and is it building up and you have blood levels. And so, yeah, you got to think about the source, and if it uh, potentially is contaminated, you're drinking a concentrated source of that. And I think a lot of the fish oil companies, they keep that in mind, but it's becoming harder and harder to, uh, you know, keep fish healthy in the water, because it's just toxic now. So, yeah. I also have heard the argument about, I was talking to a gentleman at a conference a while back, and he was saying that, fish oil is counterproductive and you should be focusing on omega 6s, which, like EPO, evening primrose oil, is more of an omega 6. There's some of those oils. So I've heard different perspectives on that.
Interesting. Was that at the your exosome event?
Yeah, exosome event.
Was it
Yep.
there?
Yeah, it was.
That's weird. I wanted to ask you about that. Because to my understanding, they had a big. Did you hear about that? Like they're banning exosomes. Like
I
I'm pretty
did
sure it's
not
gonna be
hear.
banned. Like there was a big. So I think in 2019, maybe it was earlier than that, that the FDA came forward and said, "Hey, we're not allowing you guys to use amniotic products anymore unless they're FDA approved." I think is the actual. You can
Mm-hmm.
use like topical for wound care,
Yep.
but I don't think injection wise. Because I was talking to a company, I was trying to use one that was covered by Medicare, and like obviously I need to have my ducks in a line if I'm going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But to my understanding, a lot of these companies continue to make these products, and I think they're great products. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. I've only heard what was your experience at the Exosome conference? You don't have to use names, but
Yeah. So I just heard a lot of experiences about clinical cases of improvement utilizing some of these. And I remember conversations about changing an FDA and not really knowing where the scope is going for these types of therapies. It sounds like they had, this particular company had like a crackdown that happened in 2019, and they were investigated and they were able to prove that what they were doing was legitimate and fine, and they're still in business and they're still offering it. But yeah, it's just like any other aspect. Supplements, peptides, like NAC is now uh, off the market, or changing in rights to have that or produce it. So yeah, same with exosomes. I mean, the territory is unknown and it's definitely been threatened. Uh, so I haven't used them at all in my practice. I just went to the conference. I just wanted to learn, just absorb it all and hear about the cases. A lot of hair regeneration, massive keloids, incredible results with keloids, which are really tough to get rid of cosmetically. They just keep regrowing. So it's pretty great in aesthetics, plastic surgery. It's a great application.
yeah, you're familiar with the term minimally manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the terminology had said in 2000. It was like 2018 or 19.
Yep.
And they came out and they said all stem cell, all products, all biologics need to be minimally manipulated before, right? Like autologously, you can take your stem cells out and shoot them in your joint, but you can't take Wharton's jelly or amniotic or someone else's exosomes and shoot them into your body, especially if they're being manipulated at all now. And in my understanding, it was kind of like one of those things like with ACG. ACG got banned, but I don't know about you. I've been able to get it from some pharmacies for a little bit, and now they're all kind of running out. And the FDA, like there's, to my understanding, the FDA comes out and like a lot of different things. Like you can't use testosterone for anti-aging, but it's not like they're going to come and shut you down if you're doing it until you get caught or until you get in trouble.
Right.
And that's my understanding with the exosome thing is like now the FDA made a statement, and now they're going to start. Now they redid. They were going to do something last year. It was actually fall of 2019, and it got pushed back because COVID had just came out, like late fall. And then they were supposed to redo it last summer, and they got pushed back. And then it happened like 2 weeks ago where they basically said, all right, we're going to start giving out cease and desist letters to all the companies who have a approved, minimally manipulated product. So
interesting. Okay. I didn't hear that most recent.
We'll see. Yeah. Cause we had a product that I was about to start using, and they came out, they told us for the previous 2 months, and the company was like, don't worry, it won't happen. And they're like, hey, it happened. We're going to have to try and give you a different product. And they're working, I don't know, they're working on getting a product, right? Because now it's about filling it, fitting into the rules. So, well, anyways, I don't want to take up too much of your time. And I think my cleaning lady's trying to break in on me.
Oh,
we interrupted.
All right. Well, this is great. We covered a lot.
Yeah, hopefully we flooded all y'all out there's brains with some pretty cool stuff. Dr. Amber, it's always a pleasure to catch up with you and learn about all the cool things in the naturopathic verse. How can people find you, and you can give a little spiel about, everything kind of going on your end?
Yeah, great. Yeah, so feel free to reach out to me. I am on YouTube at the Peptide Doc. I'll reshare this video on my page as well. I have a lot of interviews on there. And then Instagram is Dr. DOCTOR Amber ND. Twitter, Facebook, all the same name for that. And then a couple things that are happening. So I have a Hormone Foundations course. I have a health coach who works with me. The opportunity to go without working with a practitioner. It's really stage one, all the fundamentals, basics of hormone health. 6-week training, that's online. You can dive into that. You get support from a health coach on that. Anybody can do it. It's open, available. And we also have a low sugar challenge that's running this week, and we'll do it again. So it's a meal plan, the whole 9 yards. You get text message notifications, so I'll run through an app. So that's an opportunity too. If you want a free thing, you just ready to make a dietary lifestyle change and you don't know where to start, that's a great place to start. And my health coach, Abby, really runs that and walks you through everything there. And yeah, peptides, all things peptides. I have a Peptide RX Instagram page. Go look at that. It'll talk about a lot of the peptides that we mentioned today.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Go over to her channel, subscribe, hit her up on Instagram. She's always popping out cool, new information. Dr. Amber, it's been a pleasure as always.
Thanks so much.
And everyone else, God bless.